So welcome everyone to this circular talk on this reading guide that we created. First, some practicalities. It would be good if you switch your microphone off and your camera too. And if you have a question during the presentations, please put your question in the chat. And during the panel discussion at the end, you may raise your virtual hand. This webinar will be recorded, just so you know, and it will be on the website of the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Okay, now I want to introduce you to Corina Murafa, a Romanian member of the Economic and Social Committee. She is an expert in public policy, affordable housing, and sustainability, specializing in just an energy transition and energy poverty. She has worked with the World Bank, European Commission, Deloitte, and national governments. Corina, we are very happy that you want to start with welcoming all our partners. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here and to meet all of these practitioners in the field of circularity and sustainability. I look forward to learning from you as well. Basically, as you mentioned, I'm a member of the European Economic and Social Committee, and I'm honored to be here today because the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform is a joint initiative between our committee and the European Commission since 2017, designed as a virtual hub for advancing circular economy practices across Europe. Through this platform, us as a committee, together with the European Commission, we want to connect stakeholders, share knowledge, work to break down barriers to sustainable development. And as you all know, the strength of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform really lies in its collaborative network. We like to call it sometimes a network of networks, because indeed you come from so different backgrounds and organizations, ranging from businesses, NGOs, research institutions, public authorities, consumer organizations, and thus, what we see in the platform is really a space for diverse voices to exchange ideas, to innovate, to implement circular economy solutions. So today's circular talk is very provocative and interesting, I would say, navigating the circular built environment, presentation of the ECESP reading guide. It's always a very difficult acronym to pronounce, but the content is nonetheless very, very important. This guidebook, this reading guide, it really is, in my opinion, an example of how the platform fosters an inclusive dialogue with stakeholders outside the leadership group. So a very diverse set of stakeholders. We want to engage a range of participants to and collaborate on shared circular economy goals. And with the talk, we hope to reach new target groups that maybe are not so familiar with the circular principles in the work environment, but are nonetheless maybe working on affordable housing. As you know, affordable housing is a topic which is right now very high on the European agenda at the European Commission level. There will be an action plan on affordable housing. Inside our committee, we have had various opinions dealing with affordable housing. And obviously, you know, we want to build affordable, but also better in terms of sustainability and in terms of circularity. So today's session will focus on, you know, giving a stage and a voice for top researchers and the policymakers to share insights on the, circularity in the built environment. There will also be a panel discussion where you can ask questions, you can dive into significant conversations, and this very exciting reading guide, where we have a range of documentation around circular design, resource efficiency, urban mining, digital tools, and more, which obviously, you know, shape the built environment. The guide is meant to help practitioners in the field navigate key publications on the matter and stay ahead of the latest developments. So, as I said, by bringing together so many diverse stakeholders and perspectives, we aim to explore how circular economy principles can be implemented in affordable housing, especially highlighting your insights as...
Wait, You're muted now. Sorry.
Yes, by mistake. I apologize. Without further ado, I think it's time to delve straight into the conversation. Thank you for joining today. I look forward to the discussions ahead and, of course, to working together in advancing our shared circular economy goals. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Corina, for this welcome. And I just want to add to your introduction that our previous circular talk was on affordable housing. And this is also available at the website of the stakeholder platform. So if you're interested, people can look at that after this webinar. So I'll continue. I hope everything is clear then. So now I'll start with introducing myself. I'm Vera Labeo, and I work since 2013 as a facilitator for circular economy. And now this is in the public-private partnership Circular Flanders. I coordinate the leadership group on circular built environment of this European circular economy stakeholder platform. And in Flanders, I have coordinated the Green Deal on circular construction, and I'm involved in other topics like procurement and digitalization. Great. And now I want to go into the reading guide because everyone is really curious. You will be able to look at it in more detail. Wait, sorry. Each year, our leadership group looks at what actions can we take to make it clear to connect stakeholders. And this year, we were thinking first on a guide on circular construction, but then during our meeting, we came up to the conclusion that there are so many interesting studies. So the problem is not the lack of information, but the availability and knowing where to find this information. Therefore, we decided to create a reading guide to help you find relevant publications and studies. You can find this guide since today at the stakeholder platform, but please wait until the end to look at it. So the guide is structured around some key themes and then followed by a detailed list of publications for further reading. In addition to providing a comprehensive overview of these key publications, this guide highlights the significance of the R strategies. Integrating circular principles into day-to-day working process is not easy. You all know that, I think. And that is why Circular Flanders, OVAM, and Chris Blijkers have created an ambition chart. And that is a detailed framework to determine circular strategies for design and construction. Since also a common language is very crucial, the Dutch initiative, The New Normal, is a great help. And during our last circular talk on affordable housing, Bas has explained this principle. So you can also review it in the previous circular talk. Then one of the fundamental principles for the circular built environment is designing buildings to be future-proof. And several publications go into this topic, from more general design principles towards a very specific guidance on case studies. All those guides and are publicly available, and in our reading guide, we provide the direct link to those publications. And here in yellow, you see the publication that will be presented further on. Efficient use of materials and resources is another cornerstone of the circular economy in the built environment. And by assessing life cycle impacts, prioritizing sufficiency, and embracing innovative materials, stakeholders can significantly reduce environmental footprints while maintaining economic value. Josefina and Zsolt will present the report Sufficiency in the Building Sector after my introduction. But on this topic, also other interesting reports were published this year. You will find them all in the reading guide. The next chapter is going into the materials and urban mining. An example is the report of the Public Waste Agency, published 1 month ago, on what recycling options exist today for different types of non-stony waste. And it includes relevant information for demolisher processors, and this for 16 waste types. To make the transition to a circular economy in the construction sector feasible, promoting standardization is crucial. Helpful in this case is the ISO TC 323 on circular economy. This guide gives a holistic perspective, but more important, it fosters consumers' trust in recycled and upcycled products, something that is really necessary if we want to upscale these principles. This chapter has more than 10 studies and tools, so I couldn't go into all of them, but I just want to mention the Concular tool as one example. This is an AI-driven platform that matches buyers' demands for circular construction materials with the suppliers' circular materials themselves. Then circular economy is linked to many policy frameworks. You know, it's not one thing. It's linked to a lot of policy frameworks. But a guide on Circular Flanders created together with the Association of Cities, VVSG. It guides local authorities in how to integrate circular principles in their local policy. For example, the case of the City Hall of Roeselaar, the case is explained in the guide. And it shows how you can ask for reused materials, for example, in a tender, but also how to manage this circular ambition throughout the construction phase. And later today, Valia is going to present the guide made by the EBC to help SMEs with the new requirements of the construction product regulation. After the presentation of Josefina and Jolt, Nick Jeffries from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation will present a study that demonstrates the economic potential through more effective management of materials and the protection and expansion of nature. Another study just published last month by the CE Center highlights the benefits of circular economy in climate targets via the introduction of the M level, the material level. It explains how the use of lower impacts. Someone microphone is on.
Nee, dat klopt. Hè. Er gaat een ding zijn, maar het
Can someone mute? Yes, sorry. If there are any questions or reactions, you can give them in the panel. So it explains at the M level how the use of lower impact materials can minimize the carbon emission and total environmental impact of constructions. For Flanders, this would be approximately 146 kilotons of CO2 equivalent per year. And the gain in terms of environmental impacts is estimated at approximately 9,000 points per year. But it's certain that you can check this full publication in the reading guide. Finally, our reading guide gives an overview of several platforms where you can find cases and learning lessons. And the final speaker of today, Arno, will give us an overview of educational programs and other initiatives to make sure the theoretical knowledge gets translated in concrete action. But now I have talked enough, and I would like to present Josefina Lindblom. She works at the European Commission for DG Environment, and this since 2011. She's responsible for the work on sustainable buildings and has, among other things, managed the collaborative development of levels, a common framework for the assessment and reporting of sustainability performance of buildings. And then Joel Todd is the senior project manager at Building Performance Institute Europe, where he is responsible for the number of research projects focusing on whole life carbon emissions and building stock decarbonization. Yes, Josefina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about how we have identified the importance of using the existing building stock better than what we do today, and have that as a first reaction as opposed to always build new when we have a new need, a new demand. So if I could have the next slide, thank you. So yeah, some numbers, or rather one number, the 40% number. We know that about 40% of our extracted materials in the EU is consumed by the sector. And this, of course, also gives rise to a lot of construction and eventually demolition waste. Also, about 40% of our totally generated waste in the EU is construction and demolition waste. We also have about 40% of all our greenhouse gas emissions in the EU coming from this sector. So with that, I mean both operational and embodied carbon. So the embodied carbon is the carbon emissions which have been released when we were producing the materials and actually constructing the building. So these are emissions which then have been emitted before an occupant actually enters the building for the first time in any case. So there's a lot of, if you go back, please.
Oh, sorry.
There's a lot of energy which is related to this material use as well. And also the last point there is that we are also aware of that about 40% of our building stock is in the EU is underused in one way or the other, either not used at all or simply not used to its full potential. So this means that there is a lot of vacant space that could be used. And then the next slide, please. And I was talking about how material that we use for our buildings have a direct impact also on our greenhouse gas emissions, hence why it's so important to use the existing building stock better. And I just wanted to visualize this a bit. So here we see the carbon emissions or the greenhouse gas emissions over the life cycle of a building. The yellow one or the orange one is the operational carbon. So that would mean the emissions that we have due to heating and cooling, etc. The pink one is the embodied carbon. So that's the one which is related to primarily to the material that we are using. And you see that there is a big peak at the very beginning. This is what we call the upfront carbon. So we have this peak, but we also have it then later on for renovation and repurposing and so on, and at the end of life. But this means that if we could avoid this first pink peak, the upfront embodied carbon, which we would if we are not constantly building new as soon as we identify a new need, then we could sort of get rid of a big part of the carbon emissions over the building's life cycle. Hence the importance of looking into this from a climate perspective. There are many other reasons as well. So the next slide, please. So we see this as like a resource hierarchy almost. It was very important. The first thought reaction should be then to better use the buildings that we have already. If we are able to do that, we can reduce the demand for building new. If the buildings that we have are not useful for the need that we have, well, then we need to look at how we can transform those buildings, renovate them, repurposing them so that they become buildings that we can use as opposed to standing partly at least vacant. So in that sense, we would extend the lifetime of buildings so that we can meet those new or changing demands even, and keep as much as possible of the existing buildings. So really reconsider demolition as well. And if that is not enough to provide the housing or other kind of building needs that we have, then of course we have to build new. Or I should say, if we are renovating as well, we need to, for both new and for renovation, we should of course consider reusing or recycling material that is already out there. So I think this is the cascading principle we need to consider. And I know that different speakers today will talk about different parts of this chain, but it's important to keep this perspective in mind so that we, in the end, reduce emissions in the most efficient order. The next slide, please. So there are lots of benefits and different kinds of drivers for sufficiency. Sufficiency is, of course, the concept that we're using in relation to using what we have better, using what we have more efficiently. So, for example, it's not only the climate perspective that I raised before, but if we are not building as much new as we otherwise would have done, it means that we also have a smaller land take for the buildings themselves, but also for the necessary infrastructure around those or to those new buildings. And if we have less land take, that's positive for biodiversity for sure, but also for climate resilience, of course. It would mean that we would have a smaller demand for new materials, whether primary or secondary materials for that matter, if we don't build as much new. So it would provide us with a better independency when it comes to material. It would, of course, reduce the embodied carbon emissions, as I already mentioned, and it would most likely also reduce our waste streams from the sector. And then you're also aware of that there is a new initiative from the Commission, which has been launched very recently, which is concerned with affordable housing. And there we also believe that, of course, depending on how you work with sufficiency, you can have different results, but there are indeed sufficiency measures which could also result in affordable housing and shared spaces to a much larger extent than what we see today. It could also mean less isolation, more co-creation between different neighbors or cohabitants. So next slide, please. So what is the Commission doing in this area? Well, not that much yet, but we have started at least by identifying the potential of these kinds of concepts and the way of working. We've had some smaller studies on this. We have started to include this kind of thinking into different kinds of funding programs, whether it's research in Horizon Europe or in other kinds of funding. Also, the new European Bauhaus initiative is looking into this. We will have a roadmap for the decarbonization of buildings and the building stock coming out later this year. And there we have identified sufficiency as one of different measures along this cascading principle, the resource hierarchy that I showed you, as a way of reducing emissions overall from the sector. We have levels, which Laila mentioned, that I was in charge of a few years ago to manage the development of. It is a framework to assess and report on sustainability performance of buildings. And there are indicators there as well on design for deconstruction, design for adaptability, and things which are very much linked to sufficiency. And then, of course, we have this affordable housing plan, this initiative, which is new, and where it's just getting started. So we don't know exactly where it's going to take us. It's a big collaborative process. You may even have been already invited to comment on ideas that have come forward, or you probably will be very soon. They are planning a big consultation process. And it's clear that sufficiency or using buildings in a better way, the existing building stock in a better way, will feature as one of the aspects that will be strongly considered in this initiative. So if you're interested in this area, I suggest that you follow the Affordable Housing Initiative closely and put in your comments where you have the possibility to do so. I believe that this was my last slide, perhaps to check. Yes, indeed. So I thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. If you have questions for Josefina already, you can post them in the chat, and then later on in the panel discussion, you can also ask them live. Stolt, will you share your screen? Yes.
I will do, yes. Thanks a lot, Violet. Thanks also, Josefina, for the preamble to this very short presentation of what sufficiency means or could mean in the building sector. I'm just moving the presentation in full screen. Yeah, yes. I think you can see
it's
now.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. Super. Excellent. All right. So here is what I propose to talk about very briefly. Yeah, just to set out what the sufficiency principles could mean in the building sector. And I would like to do this by reflecting a bit on what we know so far about the impacts, the potential opportunities, what sort of policy interventions out there, based on the existing literature, as well as some case study analysis that we have recently completed for the European Commission for DG Environment. Josefina was just talking about that. And then I would just want to leave with a couple of final remarks that hopefully will be taken up later on also during the panel conversation. All right, so so here is the report that has been released end of last year, and as Josefina has explained, it was very interesting because the case to look more into sufficiency in the building sector actually came up as a side, as an annex to the forthcoming whole life carbon roadmap and the technical study that we have completed, which looked into the available carbon reduction potential. And in that technical study, we actually looked at two potential scenarios. One was technology-based, the other one was on the top of it, added a lifestyle change, avoid and reduction measures as well. So there is actually what we try to develop a bit to give it a bit more formal space and to try to quantify both the qualitative and quantitative aspects. Now, the scope of this report, which I'm going to refer on later on, is mostly looking at sufficiency from the perspective of better using the existing building stock by reducing vacancies or redistributing existing space to overcome partial vacancies. But as I will explain later on, sufficiency actually can mean a bit more than just that. Well, I think you have already shown this beautiful decision hierarchy that has been already included in the annotated bibliography. I wanted to put this on the slide again because I think having in mind that our audience today here is mostly seasoned circularity practitioners, I think actually there's a lot of alignment between what sufficiency is and what circularity applied within the built environment means. So this is not so much about coming up with something new or doing something else. It's not just about a new buzzword. Actually, there's a lot of commonalities, and you can just mention here the very first question that every building practitioner should ask, to very question the need for new construction, focus on preserving the value of the existing buildings, try to provide something which is more for shared spaces or provides for the future use of spaces. I think a lot of this is very much aligned with also what we think is included in sufficiency. But what I wanted to highlight is that I think there are two additional dimensions to sufficiency which are important. One is the social foundations. So when we look at sufficiency, we also look at what is actually suited for the needs of the users, of the occupiers, for their well-being. And it's also, this is what has been mentioned earlier by Josefina, that I think with the forthcoming housing plan, it's not just about the building or creation of new housing units, but it's also about providing something that is suited for the needs of the population. And the other very important dimension is that we don't only look at these principles from the perspective of individual buildings, but we are looking at this from the perspective of the existing building stock, the existing built floor area. And then when you have this more overarching comprehensive outlook, suddenly a lot of measures such as better use of the existing spaces or how to redistribute the built space is available, which is clearly something that is very important, not just from the climate mitigation, avoidance of greenhouse gas emissions, but also for a number of other positive benefits. So interestingly, we came up with something which is very similar in terms of decision hierarchy when you look at sufficiency. And again, these are just simple measures which I think convey the fact that sufficiency can be applied in very different ways. It doesn't mean that we stop constructing new at all. It means at minimum, let's say, if you build new, at least you look into the future use, you look at the extension of the lifetime. But it can be also applied to a lot of other situations. And importantly, again, it can be applied not at just individual level, building level, but also at the neighborhood level or at the level of the existing housing stock. Now, these are very simple guidelines. But actually that is, and you may say that this is just common sense, but actually this is what makes it so radical. And it makes it so radical because simply it goes very much against what we see is still mainstream construction sector practices, which starts very often with building new. But how to put these in a bit more formal, in a bit more theoretical or normative framework, and just to provide a concise definition of what sufficiency in the building sector could mean. So again, I think one good way of looking at the concept is to look at it from this sort of donut that has the two types of enoughs. So you see on the outside layer, the planetary boundaries where we have too much. So it's enough to harm our planet or environment more. And then when you look into the inner layer of this donut, you see where we don't have it actually enough. And these are the sustainable development goals where we clearly need to do a lot more. And we as the building sector, as the built environment, are quite responsible for providing these basic needs. So essentially, sufficiency aligns with this vision to fulfill human rights to adequate housing and viewing buildings as a vital component to societal well-being. So another way of looking at what sufficiency is to put it in, if you like, in alignment with efficiency. So if efficiency is about doing the right things, doing the things right, sufficiency is actually about doing the right things. So if you like, sufficiency is about addressing the root cause of things, and it's not about the incremental improvements. And I think essentially what I want to say is that efficiency without sufficiency is almost, it doesn't really work. It's almost like a waste. In fact, in reality, you need efficiency and sufficiency. Now, when we look at the existing literature and we're asking the question, what is the evidence base? What is already out there in terms of opportunities, in terms of potential benefits and impacts? There is actually quite a plethora of and growing literature which talks about these implications. And these are just some highlights. I can't go in detail, but the essential message here is that if we are able to harness sufficiency in the existing building stock, we can actually almost avoid the need for new construction. And especially this is politically relevant in the current time horizon, as we know that we are actually dealing with a severe housing and affordability crisis. So actually a lot of this can be met, a lot of these needs can be met simply by repurposing or reusing the existing space. And it's not just about meeting these needs, but this comes also with massive resource savings, which is something around 60%. This was based on a study in Germany, but there are other reports which are very much aligned with that findings. And then it's also interesting because we need to create a narrative for making sufficiency investable, making the business case for the current construction and real estate sector. And this systemic report looked at the investment opportunity. So essentially, what is the investment opportunity of sufficiency as a separate asset class? And they focus on urban regeneration projects, and they put this really staggering figure of what is an opportunity, an investable opportunity out there. So it's actually, we can make this work for the sector, and it's not about renunciation. It's not about stop new construction or construction activity just from one day to another. It's about repurposing. It's about reorienting capital flows as well as construction sector activities to what we actually have. And this actually supported with a quite higher level of social acceptance. There is already quite a lot of interest, and there is a lot of interest from people and from population, more than actually I think policymakers currently would assume. There have been studies which have been showing that actually there is populations are ready to go further for more ambitious policy measures targeting sufficiency, and that also aligned with the public consultation that we did for the whole life carbon roadmap study. Essentially, a lot of industry stakeholders has provided the feedback that avoid and reduction measures should be the ones that policymakers should prioritize. This slide just provides a breadth of the case studies that we have reviewed for the purpose of this European Commission study. As you see here, that there's a really diversity of potential intervention measures from a set of different countries. Some of these are formal, other are almost like informal, run by NGO or voluntary organizations. And I think this just provides a good overview of what can be considered as sufficiency measures for better harnessing existing spaces. And then we actually looked at the potential savings in terms of quantitative figures, which we tried to upscale in terms of avoided embodied emissions that comes with the construction of new housing. And we came to this quite compelling greenhouse gas emission savings, which then also summarized here. So if we bring together all these initiatives that we have looked at, and we just only looked at 5 case studies, there's a lot more out there across Europe. So based on what we have reviewed, we can see here that within 1 year, actually, we can completely avoid the need for new residential constructions. And this is particularly relevant, again, in the context of we are dealing with a housing and affordability crisis. Because very often we are not only talking about providing new homes or new housing units at a lower price, but also very quickly. And this is now one of my final slides. Interestingly, when we are looking at the benefits, we looked at greenhouse gas emissions or avoidance of greenhouse gas emissions, but interestingly, when reviewing the case studies, we found out that many of these initiatives have been put forward not because of climate change mitigation objectives, but because of other social or economic reasons. So these are just some core benefits that we have discussed in the report, and these again provide a very compelling case other than just climate change mitigation, why we should give more priority to sufficiency. And that leaves us with a few reflections towards the end. And one of these is essentially our existing policy framework and metrics or KPIs that we have in building regulations, which sets out what needs to be built, how to build, what gets constructed. You ask this question whether these are fit for the purpose and to what extent we have to revise this or improve these, especially because we had this drive for lower greenhouse gas emissions even over the life cycle of the building, but a lot of these savings are being offset actually by having bigger homes or having a growth generally of floor area in Europe, in the European building stock, which is not matched with the current demographic trends. And then also for a question for the industry of how to create more value from doing less. And this is about, I think other panelists will talk about, of how to create the urgency for preserving what we have and valuing this and just getting out of this usual mainstream thinking of new is always better. And then finally, some of the recommendations that we put forward in this report, and that these are just a starting point for integrating sufficiency principles better in the policy landscape impacting on buildings, but also on in current building practices. And everything starts actually with better data collection, because we need to know where the potential is in order to be able to harness it later on. A lot of these initiatives that I have shown, they show a lot of promise. Some of these can be upscaled clearly, but we need to look into what works, what didn't work, just to identify what the core ingredients or the success factors are. And that's something that then we need to be analyzed further in order to translate them into concrete and actionable policy recommendations. And then finally, maybe relevant for the audience today, our entry point to this topic was through whole life carbon reductions or avoidance, but I think there are other entry points how sufficiency can be made relevant, and this can be clearly made relevant from the perspective of, let's say, resource efficiency or circularity. And what we are talking about is something which is a bit more systemic and requires more system thinking. So making this work actually will require a bit more comprehensive review and collaboration within the sector. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Josefina and Scholt. I think if you have questions, I saw some already, so perhaps you can answer them in the chat. But later on, I already said you can ask your questions live in the panel. So our next guest is Nick Jeffries. He has worked for over almost a decade at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, championing the circular economy in a number of different areas, including water, food systems, and more recently, the built environment. He's an environmental engineer by profession and lives with his family on the Isle of Wight. I just wanted to show the introduction, but yes, please, you can share your own screen, Nick.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
You got it? Yeah, sorry,
yes.
I hope I didn't jump the gun a little bit on sharing my slides. So, yes.
But we see you, we don't see your slide yet.
Oh, you don't see them yet? Okay, let me just try that again. Good. Share. Can you see now?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your introduction, Viola, and thank you for inviting me to contribute to this great initiative. Really fascinating previous presentation. I hope I believe there's a lot of complementarity to what I'm now going to present. So as Viola just said, I've been at the foundation for about a decade, working in many different domains. Right now, of the circular economy, right now, my role is leading the foundation's efforts in trying to promote and scale up a circular and nature positive built environment. And what do we mean by this? Well, I think Walter Starhell's aphorism captures the essence very well. It's about doing more with less over longer periods. But I might add to this that we also need to make better material choices and put nature at the heart of our decision making. The economic system, after all, is part of the bigger system, nature. So our work at EMF entails a combination of we try to shift mindsets through research and thought leadership. We empower decision makers by developing tools and frameworks they can use in their work. And we try to actually drive solutions activation by working with our business and policy network and wider circular economy community. But today, I wanted to share with you some thought leadership that we carried out last year that was published in our report titled Building Prosperity, Unlocking the Potential of a Nature Positive Circular Economy for Europe. But before I start my guided tour of this report, which you can follow if you want, I think Bella or Charlotte will share the link with you at some point in the chat. Just a little bit of context. Why did we produce this report? We wanted to restate the economic case for circular economy in Europe. With last year being an election year in Europe, we felt the need for a strong economic argument that works across the political spectrum to influence decision makers and persuade them to shape policy and incentive structures that supported circular economy. We chose the built environment as our focus sector because it's relevant to all 28 member states and the European economy as a whole. Built environment accounts for about 10% of the overall EU economy and employs directly or indirectly about 25 million people. What we were also observing was that there was growing resistance to nature protection targets, such as those within the now thankfully signed nature restoration law with many perceiving the choice as a little binary. We wanted to prove that economy and nature aren't necessarily in opposition. So putting nature at the heart of decision making can actually drive economic activity and lead to long-term prosperity. This leads to the key message of the report. If you only remember one thing about it, it is that a circular and nature-positive evolution of the built environment presents a significant economic opportunity which aligns business interests with environmental imperatives. Just one anecdote related to this. My colleague, Josh Blériot, who leads our policy team, recently met with the director of biodiversity unit at DG Environmental. And the first thing that was mentioned was, and I'm quoting him here, was how useful building prosperity is for them in discussions with stakeholders who see nature targets as additional costs and threats. Understanding the economic angle gives a completely different point of view, and it helps a lot. And so I encourage you to use it in the same way. While I remember, perhaps when you think about the 9 R strategies that Veerle flashed up earlier, perhaps one other R we could add is regenerate, to make it a nice round 10. So really ask the question, how can the built environment contribute to the regeneration of nature? And hopefully this report in some way answers that question. All right, so on to the report itself. So here's the contents page showing how the report is structured. I'm going to focus predominantly on the second half from page 41 onwards, which is the analysis and modelling relating to the built environment. The first half before that, up to page 41, you could say it sort of lays the foundation for what follows. And the 3 key messages you could probably get out of the first half would be, firstly, our economic and societal vitality relies upon the health of nature. Over half of the world's economic activity depends on nature. And in the Eurozone, 72% of businesses are highly dependent on at least one ecosystem service. Yet this relationship is being constantly undervalued. Secondly, the circular economy offers a strategic framework addressing our most pressing global challenges, while at the same time creating business opportunities, increasing resilience, generating new types of employment, and even improving health outcomes. So the time is now to scale circular solutions. By the way, a lot of the data on this slide is from our previous reports. The first half is in a way a little bit of review of what we've published in the last 10 years. So the EU already has a robust policy framework in place. Technologies that can enable implementation are mature, and financial institutions are increasingly driving capital towards circular solutions. So having looked at the big picture, we then zoomed into one specific sector, the built environment. But why focus on the built environment? A multiplicity of reasons. On the macro level, it's everywhere. It's all around us. It's part of the fabric of human existence. By improving it, we improve all of our lives. As I said before, it's economically significant. 10% of the EU economy, 25 million people employed. But it's not just about the numbers. Europe's cities and buildings form its cultural fabric, its appeal. Most businesses operate in cities, so the built environment shapes their daily operations. While economically important, it also significantly contributes to pressing environmental challenges. And Josephina outlined those very well in her presentation. The 40% number, materials consumption, waste, unutilized buildings, emissions, nature degradation. It also faces social challenges. The need to transform, I think it's 30 million inefficient buildings, and providing affordable housing for those who need it. And finally, there is the important question of climate adaptation. Consider this, between 2000 and 2009, there were 3 storms in Europe that cost the insurance industry more than 1 billion euros. From 2010 to 2019, there were 10. Since 2020, there have already been 6. Climate change is becoming more and more costly, and the built environment is simultaneously a victim as well as a potential solution. A better designed built environment can avoid future costs related to extreme weather. So we strongly believe that these interconnected challenges present opportunities. Have a little mute there. When addressed through circular and nature positive principles. And it's these opportunities, the system-wide benefits, that we've tried to lay out in and quantify in our study. So our methodology began by distilling potential circular economy strategies that we identified through our own knowledge, through literature reviews and expert interviews into a long list. We then targeted strategies that are both investable and nature enhancing to enable our quantitative analysis. Of course, this doesn't exclude other strategies. They all need activation, but for a clear economic case to be made, we needed to focus on a select few. So we sought mature, scalable investments with outsized positive impact on nature. And this positive nature impact we envisaged through three mechanisms: revitalizing existing land and assets to avoid costly nature degrading urban sprawl. So this is the not building new strategy laid out in the sufficiency report by the previous speakers. Maximizing nature in cities to create resilient, vibrant urban spaces. So this is more tree-lined streets and the increased use of green-blue infrastructure. And optimizing building design and material sourcing. And this is more about reducing the impact in construction supply chains. Now, all of these strategies can be implemented on their own, but they are much more impactful and viable if they are planned and delivered as an integrated system. So there are a number of examples provided in the report that illustrate the integration of such strategies. For example, Hafen City is a 160-hectare brownfield development in Hamburg that both revitalized abandoned docklands, increasing the city's floor area by 40% without having to go at all into the green space around the city, and at the same time reusing many old buildings and dedicating 25% of the master plan to green spaces. And by the way, for case study enthusiasts, the Building Prosperity website features examples demonstrating these strategies from across Europe. Have I got a slide? Yeah, so there are our main case studies that we focused on, showing the geographical distribution. So onto the quantification of the benefits. For our modelling, we set ambitious but realistic targets for Europe's built area. The assumptions and targets we applied are presented in the appendix on page 103. But as an illustration, for revitalisation, we looked at developing 4% of Europe's estimated 3 million brownfield sites over 10 years into vibrant mixed-use districts, and converting 8% of Europe's vacant commercial real estate into residential. I think one of the listeners, Chris, did make that observation when she was looking at that the sufficiency pyramid. What about the conversion of commercial real estate to residential? Which is a good observation. So there are three broad categories of benefits that we identified, and these are shown on page 62 and 63. So there's direct economic benefits, wider economic benefits, and a broader set of nature, climate, and social benefits. So firstly, on the direct economic benefits, these are benefits that are distributed across the construction value chain. So designers, engineers, suppliers, contractors, site managers. We estimated at this at between about 500 to 600 billion euros per year. Breaking this down a little, if we consider the optimized strategies, so more efficient building design and lower impact materials, this delivers a potential double benefit. It not only creates new business opportunities for suppliers and contractors, but it also reduces material consumption by 250 million tons a year, potentially, and that potentially saves developers up to 20% in material costs per project. And there are several innovative European companies that are already capitalizing on this shift in the construction industry. So, for example, providing efficient and modular and prefabricated construction services, or leaning into lower impact materials like timber. So then we look at the wider economic benefits. That's 158 billion figure. So these extend beyond the construction sector. Integrating nature into built spaces unlocks economic advantages for businesses and citizens in cities. Vibrant city centres lined with trees and green spaces can give a boost to retail and restaurants, while ecosystem services that nature provide, like cooling and stormwater management, can reduce costs and increase productivity. So these wider benefits could reach between 100 and 200 billion annually. And examples like Ljubljana, which is in this photo, beautiful Ljubljana, Copenhagen and Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain demonstrate how nature in city centres can catalyse economic prosperity while improving health and well-being to citizens. Finally, there's the non-economic benefits, and these include a land use impact. So by applying these strategies across the board, we could safeguard over 16,000 square k's of green space across Europe. Safeguard and expand, in fact. This is equivalent to half the area of Belgium. On climate mitigation, we can reduce embodied emissions associated with the material fabric, the embodied energy, and lower per capita emissions through more compact planning. These strategies combined could potentially mitigate 5% of the European Union's overall emissions. And then there are the health and well-being and resilience benefits. Cooler cities, reduced flood intensity, higher productivity, and better air quality, all of which were quantified in the analysis. So that's the main analytical part of the report. And by the way, you could call these the macroeconomic figures. Systemic, who collaborated with this, with us on this report, they did the modelling. They followed this up with the report that Zsolt referred to, the 4 trillion figure of investable opportunities in this space. So I think really that is the next step. We really need to articulate the business case at the individual project or business level. This speaks to like one of the ways to activate all of this. And then, yeah, and that's a perfect segue into the final part of the report, which is the activation section of the report. This is from page 74 onwards. So by this point, hopefully readers will understand what we mean by a circular, nature positive built environment. They will all be salivating at all the potential benefits. And so naturally we'll be asking, well, how can we unlock this treasure trove of opportunities? The answer, of course, like so many aspects of modern life, is it's a little complicated. There is no one big unlocking mechanism. Rather, it's a combination of different stakeholders working together, pulling different levers at different times. So we started this section by first looking at the barriers, the market, policy and financial barriers that exist. So these include things like higher upfront costs, difficulties in monetizing benefits, a fragmented value chain with split incentives. So sometimes, often the party who pays is not the party who will benefit, and policies and regulations that hinder progress. In the UK, you can still get VAT relief on demolition activities, but not for refurbishment. And then a few targeted focus areas that could help overcome these barriers. For example, mobilizing financial flows. The UN, I think it's UNEP, they've estimated that we need 542 billion euros a year investment by 2030 to reach climate, biodiversity and nature targets. However, currently only 200 billion is being invested, and less than 18% is coming from the private sector. One way of influencing in this is to shift mindsets, to raise awareness of system benefits. An example, despite nature-based solutions for infrastructure such as bioswales, green roofs, constructed wetlands, river daylighting, being 50% more cost effective and providing almost a third more value, this type of green infrastructure only attracts 0.3% of all investment in urban infrastructure. The lion's share going to grey infrastructure, pipes and concrete channels. We need to make a stronger business case for these benefits to make them more appealing to investors. And then there is digital. The construction industry is a huge laggard when it comes to the adoption of digital solutions, with only 1% of overall revenue being invested in digital technology compared to a cross-industry average of 3%. So, for example, fashion and other sectors. So we give a number of examples of how digital, AI-powered master planning, big data-backed ecosystem service measurement tools can be a powerful enabler for the transition. And the report concludes with a targeted set of actions for key stakeholders who can catalyze this transformation. These recommendations address specific roles for policymakers, businesses, investors, and practitioners. And while this is not prescriptive, they're designed as conversation starters based on barriers and opportunities we've identified. Think of them as strategic entry points to mobilize collective action and to scale circular nature positive solutions across Europe. Okay, a lot of information there. Let me finish with a personal reflection. Sometimes this work can feel a little bit daunting and overwhelming. The juggernaut that is the technology-fueled linear economy is on a well-entrenched course. There are so many stakeholders and levers that can be pulled to set it on a better trajectory. When I think about this Herculean task ahead, I take comfort in an analogous challenge, the transition to a clean energy world. Despite the bumps along the way, time and time the doomsayers were wrong. Even the IEA predictions were way out. Last year, 30% of the world energy supply came from renewables, up from 19% in 2000. Last year, here in the UK, after 142 years, we closed down our last coal-fired power station. Large-scale system change is possible. I hope you enjoy the report. Thank you.
Thank you for this very inspiring presentation, Nick. I hope many politicians and investors watch it and learn from your report. It's important, I think. So let's go to our next speaker then. Valia Tsiala is the technical officer of the European Builders Confederation, where she monitors, evaluates, and leads advocacy activities on standardization and digitalization for construction SMEs. Additionally, she coordinates the construction experts of small business standards, ensuring that SME perspectives are effectively represented in the European and international standardization. So Valia, could you share your presentation?
So 1 second, please.
Yes.
Okay, normally now you should be able to see the
Yes,
screen.
it's perfect.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you for the introduction, earlier. So I have been listening to the presentations of the previous speakers with a lot of interest. Our presentation is a bit different in the sense that our publication that was included in the reading guide is not a study, is not a report, it is a guide, which means that our goal is to support companies, SMEs in our case, to drive this change that we really need, and that was mentioned already by the previous speakers. So before starting, because we are not such a big institution, I would like to present a bit who we are. So as mentioned, I'm here on behalf of both Small Business Standards and European Builder Confederations. Our goal is in EBC, European Builders Confederation. It's an association that is a confederation of federations, and we represent the interests of small and medium enterprises. But our membership is really mostly made of crafts and very small companies. And if you have seen some numbers, the construction ecosystem is made in majority by very small companies. So our goal is to represent their interests and make sure that the special needs that sometimes small companies have and the challenges they face are taken into account in policies and in regulations. And a sister association, or actually a child association that the EBC have co-founded, is Small Business Standards. That the goal there is a bit more specific. It's to represent the interest of small companies across the different sectors, not only for construction, in standardization, which means in the development of standards. Of course, EBC is focusing on the construction part of SBS. So what we do is that we coordinate all the activities that SBS is doing in relevance to construction. Before going to the guide, I will give a bit of context because I'm sure that many of you have heard about the construction products regulation, and it has been revised recently. But I would like to explain a bit more so that we are all on the same page of what we're talking about. So the goal of the construction product regulation, it's a regulation that exists for many years. It was a directive that was established in 1989. It became a regulation in 2011, and now it has been revised. The goal was always one, to create a single market for construction products, which means that to create harmonized rules and a common language that can be used by manufacturers in order to market their construction products and to ensure safety. Now it has been revised, it has been modernized, we can say, and it tried to solve some issues that in the previous years of implementation of the previous regulation, the 2011 one, they were identified. So in December, there was the long revision process finished, and we have a new regulation that is currently starting to become implemented step by step. That the goal is to strengthen the standardization process and to promote digitalization, because the construction ecosystem is not very digitalized and we need to become more digitalized. But most importantly, and that's the issue for today, is to enhance sustainability in many aspects, not only on circularity, but generally construction needs to become more sustainable. And so the construction product regulation have been mentioned by the European Commission many times as the main tool, the main instrument to start discussing about circularity. So if you look at the regulation, you will see a lot of points that I will not go one by one here, but a lot of points of how to do this. The first and foremost, according to the Commission, but we tend to agree with them, is that we need to have environmental information for construction products over the whole life cycle, not only the production phase. If we have this environmental information, we can better design our buildings, but we can better know how this product will be used. So it is something that is not the case. It is the case, but it's not widespread today. So the goal is to have this. Then through standardization, a goal is to harmonize the rules for used construction products. So if I need to reuse a product, currently it's quite flexible approach on how do I ensure the safety, how do I market it. So step by step, the regulation will start establishing harmonized rules on this marketing of used construction products. When the Commission will request, and we think that this, of course, will grow trust. It's a first step to grow trust to this kind of products, and the market, as a result, the market will grow. Then another thing, very important, without going through all of this, is that the instructions for use and product safety. It's something that it's set now, and it's written very clear in the regulation that we can have we can have by the manufacturer instructions on how to deconstruct the product from a building if I need to, and how to maintain it to extend the lifetime, or yes, how to install it in a way that will not need to use additives, for example, that will make it difficult to take it off from the building. And through digitalization, this information will be available to the end user if needed. So an installer will have this information, and we will have a better flow of information on how to do this. So these are some provisions that the construction product regulation is introducing. Then, what are the challenges? Because of course, every change comes with challenges. For small companies, of course, it is always a bit difficult to adapt because they have to rethink their processes. And after consultation with our membership and with our experts, we figured out that the biggest challenges are the four ones that you see on the screen. So first of all, small companies don't have the resources to read about the changes. They don't follow European news. They don't know what is happening in Brussels. They work in their everyday job site. So the first thing is that they don't know how to get informed and they don't understand what is going to change for them. The second thing is that they need to assess what they need to change, and of course, who will need to change, because some of them they will not need to adapt a lot of things, and when they will need to change. The third thing is that they need to prepare. They need to sometimes take some steps before even the implementation of the construction products regulation will enforce it for them, because, as I said, things can take time in the business processes. And third of all is that they will need to adapt eventually. That is the end goal. To try to respond to these needs, we created the guide for SMEs. The goal is to reach all these small companies that they have no idea. They are not going to read the legal text of 120 pages, if I'm not mistaken, by themselves. We try to use a simple language that everybody can understand and explain what is the changes and why they are the changes, because the why is usually a big driver on helping businesses design their actions. And another thing that is important is that we are not only speaking to manufacturers of construction products. We try to adapt the guide also along the value chain, because the better installers, as I said, or even suppliers, or everybody is informed about what is requested by the Commission, the better it will work. It's a whole value chain. It's a system. It's not one actor that should be expected to make the change. It's the whole value chain. So replying very shortly to the challenges that I mentioned before, we try to create the content of the guide by explaining, first of all, by raising awareness. Why, first of all, explaining why the CPR changed, what is the goal, what exactly changed, what are the new provisions. There is the digital product passport that in the reading guide, there are more publications that are focusing on this. And it is a very big instrument that will support, in our view, circularity in the future. But companies, they need, because they will need to invest on this, they need to understand why they're doing this. And once they understand why, we believe that they will be more inclined to do the changes. And then we explain also when. It's not, I'm not going to go into much details, but the construction products regulation is complex, has a complex timeline for implementation. It's not a law that will start today and tomorrow everybody will have to follow it. No, it's a step-by-step process. Every product group has a different timeline, and every manufacturer will, one manufacturer from the other, they will have completely different needs at the specific moment. Then, of course, we try to explain the impact, who is affected. As we said before, it's a change that doesn't affect only manufacturers of construction products, but everybody who is dealing with products. So a lot of people. Of course, not all of them need to know the same level of detail, but everybody has to understand what is happening. And so we explain a bit some deadlines and who will need to be doing what, basically. And then, of course, we, in order to help them get ready, that is the most important thing, is we explain what obligations and requirements will be introduced soon. Here, as you can see, for instance, the declaration of environmental sustainability, it's something that will come step by step, but we advise the companies to start doing this already if they're not doing this, because it's for the better interest of everybody to have this information circulating out there. And of course, the last thing, as we said, is the adapt. It's very important. We have made a checklist for SMEs that they will need to, what steps they need to follow in order to be able to market their products. And we give some tips we give some information on where to get some support and what kind of support, and what kind of, for instance, there are some simplification procedures that are in the provisions, when they can use them, how they can use them, and some like this to make their life a bit more easy, let's say. This is the table of contents that tries to reflect what I mentioned just now. And you will see that in the closing chapter, we tried also to make a link to other legislation because it's not the standalone legislation. We like to remind to people that it's not the CPIR trying to do something by themselves. The construction products regulation is a tool, like every regulation is a tool, but it works in a broader environment that companies are not, small companies are not always aware, and we try to help them understand what is happening.
You're muted. Yes.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what happened. Okay. So I was almost there. So if someone tried to mute me, you will mute me now. So how I want to close my presentation is that this is a guide that for us, it's a live document because, as I said, the implementation of the construction product regulation doesn't happen from one day to another. Information keeps coming, things keep coming. It's a process, the CPR key for those who know, or the standardization process. It's a process that involves a lot of stakeholders, and we work together to try to achieve the best result, and which means that things are dynamic. So it's a guide that we have included in our website. You will find the latest version all the time, but we will try to update it every time things are becoming more clear or according to feedback. Some companies may tell us, I figured out during implementing these things that I need more information on this. So we are open to feedback. If you read this and you think something is important is missing, please let us know. You will have my contact details later. So it's something that we are welcoming very much. And another thing important for today's discussion is that we really consider that the construction products regulation and the implementation of it, so when companies will start implementing it, is a tool that will really lead to the long-term fostering of circularity in construction. It is a first step, and if we work all together, we think that we will achieve very good results. And this is more like for companies, if they're following us, you need to monitor what is happening and you need to prepare for what is happening so that it works better for everybody. So that was.
Thank you, Valia. It was really interesting also to point out that all partners, all companies should be aware of the consequences of some legislation, but also in what they can do towards the circular economy. So thank you very much for this interesting presentation. As all presentations, all publications are in the reading guide and with a link directly to that publication. So everyone will get those links. Then now I want to go to the next speaker, Arno Everaert. And since December 2020, he is a senior scientific at the chair of sustainable construction at ETH Zurich, in charge of the program coordination of the CAS regenerative materials. Arno, it's your turn and you may share your screen.
Thank you. I will share the screen now. There. You see it?
Yes, we see it. Thank you.
So thanks for the invitation first. I'm very happy to be there. Thanks for all the other speakers also. There was a lot of very interesting stuff in there. I'm more on the education side, so I try to show what we are doing. So as you said, that the ETH Zurich, I'm working in the chair of sustainable construction with Professor Guillaume Habert. Basically, the chair is research, but also teaching, touching on life cycle analysis, on material science, developing product based on earth-based product, also doing some urban metabolism, and recently developing the interaction between material and indoor environment. So as I said, a part is education, and a few years ago, just before I started, they started a CAS, so a Certificate of Advanced Studies in Regenerative Material. Now, as I will show, it developed on different CIS, going more in details, the specifics from some subject, but the basics is what we call regenerative material is somehow the idea that it's possible today to build with very reduced carbon. We can do it, it's ready, the technology is there, the material are available. And so the idea would be to present it like this. Everything what's massive, giving thermal mass, would be based on earth or massive stones, so non-transformed and reasonably local. Giving a very healthy also air quality inside. All what would be insulation or filling some space could be brought by bio-based material, could be straw, hemp, cocoa, whatever you have in the region. Some agricultural waste could be used, and but with this, you still need a lot of stuff, doors, windows, other things, and that would be the reuse part. So if you build with these principles, you can be directly very a low impact. And as the first speaker said, Josephine, be able to avoid these upfront carbon emission from renovation. If you need to renovate, so I won't repeat all what was said, but the idea is like if you have to do something, do it with material which doesn't have any impact. So as I said, the first CIS we created was we call it now the Regenerative Essentials, gives a very big overview on all these material, on how to use them, different techniques. But we noticed that the very good quality, the part where you could say they're regenerative, what are they bringing positive on health or on the indoor quality, we don't have time to develop it really, especially with bio-based material or earth. You have some aspect has to be more developed. That's why we created this hygrothermal specialization, where we use some dynamic software to see how there's interaction between heat and moisture transport through the wall, in the wall, and how does it regulate the inside environment. And then another CIS on the structural aspect. How do you build a rammed earth load-bearing building? There's also load-bearing straw-built building. There's also the bamboo structure for different part of the world, maybe. So all this don't have the time to be developed in the first CIS. So that's why we did a new CIS. And if you combine two of these CIS plus personal work, you can do a DIS. So basically all these CIS have some modules. So it's each time a full week. So we made this to be able to to be addressed to some people not living in Zurich or in the area. And so they would have to come for a whole week. And so for professional, most of the participants are professionals. They have this intense week and they don't have anything between the weeks. It's about 1 week a month. And in each week, we combine not only lecture, like theory, but also some kind of experimental lecture where we make the participant try things. For example, poured earth, what additives do they have to use to have the right consistency and be able to develop it. So we try to have, of course, engagement and contribution from the participant because they are expert in a way already. And we also do hands-on. So that means there's always one or sometimes a little more day where they are on the building site and they just manipulate. So I will show there's a week on earth, a week on bio-based, a week on reuse. And the week on reuse, we see the picture there on the right. They just disassemble a building that will be destroyed in the future. And so they see how how is it possible to recover a window or a floor, depending on how it was built. We always also have 1 day of visits where we meet the architect or the contractor that participated in the project to show that it exists, it's there. Most of them are beautiful, so it's not a hobbit architecture, it's really modern constructions, and there are already more and more of them. And then we always have a public lecture that if you register to our newsletter, you can follow every month. We have a public lecture on a Zoom based. So that's an example. The first CIS we created, as I said, there's 5 modules, Earth-based, bio-based. So we focus really on, during the whole week, on different type of techniques. Not have so much to say about this. The participant, we have quite a small group, from 15 to 20, 18 is the best for us participant. As I said already, architects, sometimes with 20, 25 years of experience. They can be architects or engineer, but they can also be working in a city service or developing maybe a research-based group. And we do this to have a very intense interaction and to have easy to move, to go to see the buildings and having a group effect. It's important for us to have this group effect because they can learn from each other and then they can keep in contact afterwards. And we try also to make the group of each years, of course, getting in an alumni group that we try to animate somehow. So that's the CIS part. Parallel, because it's always hard to go in Zurich, of course, it costs a lot and takes time. And so the other idea was to develop a MOOC, so it's a online-based teaching, which would be free and therefore open to a much larger public everywhere in the world. So the content is basically the same as what I just described, but maybe a little less in detail. You don't have this hands-on, of course, you don't have these visits, but you have video and a lot of information, and it's a little more addressed to the south, maybe. For example, bamboo construction has a special module in it. Very soon available, not ready yet. Small technical details have to be fixed, but by the end of the year maximum, or maybe in the summer already, it should be coming. And the last project I want to present is something I saw some mapping and so like case studies project, and we always see many initiatives in different countries based on straw bale or based on earth or based on reuse. All these platforms are actually separate from each other, and the idea would be to kind of have a community-driven platform where you could find the materials, where are the resource, maybe I go on the next slide, it's clear. So kind of a mapping where you could look for the natural resource, where can you find different kind of resource, the materials, where are the distributor, where can they be found, the professional who is able to do this type of work or this other type of work, and then reference the building that's already there and that can be inspiring for next buildings. So that's about it. I think I was a bit fast, but I'm open to any question, and you can anytime contact me if you're interested.
Thank you, Arno. It was really interesting. And especially since there was already a question on skills, training and educational programs, and working on skills is very, very crucial, of course. Well, just let's continue. Then you can talk into the panel discussion. But first, I want to present to you the moderator. Our moderator today is Charlotte Cambier, and she is a project coordinator, circular construction at MBuild Flanders, the association. In 2022, she obtained a PhD in engineering sciences at the University of Brussels, with a focus on the design of buildings with high circular potential through specific actions in the design process. Charlotte, I hope you're ready. And all speakers can put their microphone and their camera on so we can start the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you, Veerle, for the very nice introduction. Yeah, let's start our panel discussion and our talk. I have seen in the meanwhile while you were doing your presentations that many people shared also their publications, their case studies. So I really like that. I think as well that our publication, Veerle, that it's a living and a growing document. So keep on posting the reports and the publications that you know, because we can only learn from them and share our knowledge more. I think that's also the goal of today. So keep doing that. While subscribing to this webinar, we asked each of you if you had a question for our presenters, for our speakers. So we will also handle those questions we received. We received quite some questions and they will be addressed, but we will start with a more general question and a more general discussion to keep our voices warm. So our panelists are our speakers, so you already know them by now, so we'll go straight into depth. As before, you, as the audience, you can still interact via the chat. We will keep on looking at it and reading them, your questions, so or via a virtual hand, so we can have an open discussion. So please don't be shy. And the questions that were asked in the chats by now and were not answered, I will also try to handle them or to take them into our discussion. All right, let's start. So let's start general, as I said. So what I noticed in the program and with our presentation is that each of the presenters talked about a different building block scale, as I would say. Nick, for example, you were talking about a nature positive and circular built environment, so it's quite a high level theme. Josefina and Scholt, you were more talking about the building stock, about sufficiency and vacancy, so more the building level or the building stock level. Valia was more talking about the products, the CPR, and so on. And then I know you went more into the materials, so regenerative materials, bio-based materials, what's also called. So my question to you is, to start, how can we merge all those knowledge that is generated on those different levels? How can we merge them? What is the link between them, and what can we do with it? Is there a clear and a common action that we can do as practitioner in the building sector? How do you see that? Who wants to start? Josefina.
With my microphone on the head, yeah. And I just wanted to say that, of course, they are all linked in the sense that they are all about providing attractive buildings in a fair way within the planetary boundaries. But, or I would say all of these things that we've talked about can work towards those goals, but they don't necessarily have to work towards those goals. So I think it's important that we steer them towards those goals. And I also think that it's important that we recognize that we need all of those contributions, let's say, in order to make it possible, our overall goals, because not one of them will manage on its own. So it's very important to keep this broad mind and broad perspective. And therefore, I believe that it's also the role, or it should be the role of politicians at different levels to recognize that, so that we are not getting bogged down into one particular solution, which we think is going to be fantastic.
Okay.
But we will really need all of those different ones to reach our goals, whether they're climate goals or something else. Yeah.
That's true. Yes, thank you. I already heard politicians should take action. Maybe Scholt, you were the second one to raise your hand.
Yeah, I think great minds think alike, which means that Josephine almost preempted what I was about to say. I was myself also surprised that we all brought up different, like I think you were referring to decision hierarchies and principles, and I think I wouldn't necessarily put them in competition. I think they were surprisingly extremely well aligned. They just had different maybe focus points or objectives, and yes, of course there are always potential trade-offs or synergies to be considered, where I think these tools are very very useful basically in helping decision making. But I think what I wanted to highlight, with at least with the sufficiency aspects and the application of sufficiency in the built environment, is that I think it's covering a gap, because there's so much of the discussions around sustainability in the built environment has been largely focused around technologies, the availability of low carbon materials, design, and so on, but very much from a technical perspective. And I think this is also how policies have been drafted and requirements have been put forward. So I think we are a bit catching up with putting the emphasis back onto the needs of people, putting back the needs of society. So it's indeed about well-being. It's indeed about more equity, fairness, distribution of resources and space. And I think that's I wouldn't say that necessarily an overarching objective, but I think it's, again, it's just we had a blind spot, and I think we are shining a light on that.
Yes, indeed. I hear also synergies, not working against each other, but together. And then that's, you had the feeling that there was until now more a focus on the technical perspective. And we should go more towards people, the nature, as Nick also mentioned until now. And maybe also our famous R strategies that were also mentioned already. Valia, you were the next one, I think, to raise your hand.
Thank you. Well, I will support. I can only support what the previous speaker said. It's true that I think also in the beginning of the event, it was mentioned that there are many things out there, and it's a good. This reading guide is a good first step to try to put them together. And all these things have a role to play. Everything together. It's a new environment that should be created, let's say. In our view, of course, because you should not forget that we are an industry association, SMEs have a very big role to play on this. When we're speaking about sufficiency, for example, SMEs are the ones doing most of the renovations, and even small scale. Sometimes we think that it's not very relevant, but every little project has a role to play. Every little product has a role to play. So for us, I heard a lot. I was very happy. I noted down that most presentations, if I'm not mistaken, mention the word collaboration. And this is what we need, collaboration in many different forms. All actors have a role to play. In our view, SMEs have a very big role to play. They create local value. We spoke also a bit about this. We touched on this. They work locally. They usually are more people-oriented, that was mentioned already. So if an action or a request, I don't know how we could call it, is to support the small companies. They need support. Things are evolving very quickly, and we need to support them in any way possible. We spoke about training. I'm sure we will develop a bit more further, because I saw it in the chat. It's an interesting topic. We spoke about economical issues, because let's be realistic. We work in an economy. If our clients don't ask us for circular solutions, why would we deliver them? So, of course, financial incentives or tax reductions on circular products. All these things are little things that, when they will be put all together, they will drive a new market, a new way of working in construction, let's say. So it's too much, I know, but this is our point of view.
Yes, thank you. I strongly agree indeed that SMEs are the ones who will do it in the end. So they are very important indeed to support. Nick, I will give the word to you. You also talked about a long list of actions. So maybe you can mention one action, or I don't know what you were going to say, but I'm very curious.
Yeah, well, it's thank you. Yes, I was just reflecting a little bit on the R strategies, and then if you think about one of the, when people talk about, well, why is the built environment not, reducing carbons more or reducing waste more, and there's or scaling up the circular economy, there's often they talk about the sort of working in silos, that one part of the value chain works in their silo, another part works in theirs, and another part works in theirs. And I was just reflecting that maybe there is a potential for R silos, that if you are into reuse, you just think about reuse. If you're into recycling, you just think about recycling. And so maybe one suggestion is just to, like, we need to just not work in our silos. I was convening a meeting about, it's a circular leaders group meeting in Amsterdam last week, and it was great that one of the topics was reuse, and one of we were talking about cement, and there was someone who was representing regeneration, someone who worked for Biomimicry 3.8, and so well, where am I going to go? And she sat in the reuse, and she found it very, very useful, because she could sort of like understand better, like the perspectives from other parts of the construction, and it enables her to do her work a little bit better, understanding the perspectives. So yeah, so let's get out of our silos. And my second point is that we need to avoid what someone wants to describe as this confusing marketplace of ideas, or death by framework. So we're all after striving for the same thing. We want an economy, a world where humans and nature can thrive, but we're just all coming about it in a different way. And so I think we just maybe somehow need to just bring a little bit of a common voice into the way we present our ideas, before then going down one layer down into how we approach it, whether it's donut economics, whether it's circular economy, whether it's biomimicry. But just when people hear, they know that it's the same thing that's being strived for. It's perhaps just a little bit of a different approach.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Very interesting indeed, those R silos. I never thought about it that way, but you are absolutely right about it. Maybe to end our circle of speakers, I will give the word to Arnaud.
Yeah, I don't have so much to add, but something I'm completely convinced is that when I work or talk about the scale of material, I don't feel at all only on the small scale. Like it was said already, but my feeling is like, because you choose some material in one specific building, it has a global effect. Which resource you use, it means where do you have to get it, how do you extract it, how do you transform it, where do you transform it. It has an impact on the global community, somehow the local community. And so I always consider material not on just this scale. Just by touching this scale, they're all connected. I think it was said before.
Yeah, yes. Thank you indeed. A lot of things to reflect on, but maybe to go further, I will pick out some questions from the audience. There was one question about reuse. So one of our silos, I would say. So reusing building elements from our existing building stock. If we want to reuse, a question there was, what about its technical performance? How can it be guaranteed? How can we know it's sufficient? And if we don't know, should we test it? Do we need certificates? And what if it's not available yet? Nick, I will pass this question to you.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, this is a important question, and it's exactly one of the areas that we're exploring in the Circular Building Coalition. So it's a coalition that EMF is part of that includes WBCSD, World Green Building Council, Circular Economy, and a few other thought leaders. And what has become clear to us is that the issue of warranties and technical performance guarantees it's a significant barrier in scaling reuse in the built environment. So when materials or fittings or furniture are reused, traditional warranty models they sort of break down because manufacturer guarantees only apply to new products and first owners. So this obviously creates uncertainty around performance, liability, and so on. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I may not need to remind listeners, but half the emissions from the construction sector come from the production of materials. So we really want to get the sector onto a low carbon pathway. We really need to embrace reuse, but in order to do so, we need to acknowledge that many stakeholders, from architects, developers, contractors, end clients, they're very hesitant to use reuse because they're not adequately, there's no adequate quality assurances. So I guess there are two ways you could approach this. Well, firstly, the manufacturing companies themselves could step up. They could offer warranties for reuse or manufactured products components. Clearly, there would have to be some kind of testing regime associated with that. And there are plenty of examples from inside and outside of the industry of companies that have done this. There's a Dutch company that actually supplies some EMF furniture called Arend. They have pioneered a warranty model specifically for reuse furniture. Renault also do it with their remanufactured gearboxes and engines. And I guess the second approach is that insurance companies need to play a role. So the market itself needs to offer new warranty products, be they large incumbents like AXA or through startups. I came across a Swedish startup called Omicom. They provide insurance to companies who offer circular business models. Or in the BE sector, I think one of the speakers already mentioned Concula, which is a German-based startup. They've developed a reclaimed construction material insurance that de-risk projects. I think their first insurance product targeted the reuse of bricks. Can I finish just with a quick plug? Because Concula were actually supported through funding provided by the Loudest Foundation via the Circular Buildings Coalition. And what the CBC do is they're able to direct money to support startups, companies, entrepreneurs that offer solutions, products and services that that address some of these market barriers. So right at this moment, we are looking for future Conculas. Last week, we launched an open call to identify a new cohort of startups, innovators that offer potential solutions for a circular built environment under 3 different challenge areas. So I'm going to share the information in the chat, but if there are any circular construction entrepreneurs out there, you have till the 13th of May to submit your proposals. I'll share the information, and there's a webinar on the 27th of March, which I think is, we're close to there, which describes the open call challenges, and you can answer any questions that you have. So I'll share that in the chat now. Sorry for that long answer.
Totally fine, thank you. I see that Josefina would like to add something.
Yes, I just wanted to say that because often we get comments because I work for the Commission, right? We have comments that the standards perhaps are not up for this entirely and this needs to be improved and so on. I've checked carefully with my colleagues working on the construction product regulation on this, and they make the point that, well, they make several points, but one is that the reuse of products is not actually a matter of standard. The standard says that you should test something, if you should test something, and how you do it. But it is really the building code, which is a national or regional competence, that says something about the actual building requirements which a project has to fulfill. So when it comes to the reuse of products, it's really up to the national or regional authorities to decide if they want to accept to put in a product which may not have a performance declaration whatsoever, because that could be the case if you have a product which has been in a building for a long time, and then you take it out and you consider reusing it. So it's really, you know, what you do if you don't have a performance declaration, and how should you then potentially test it somehow. There is, in relation to the construction product regulation, there is work ongoing to go through the standards to see for those products where this is relevant, to see also how could standards be developed for such testing eventually. But as it is so that many authorities may hold back when it comes to accept products which do not have a performance declaration, it is more common to reuse materials, of course, which are more for decoration, let's say bricks in a facade or natural stone in flooring or something like that, and less so for load-bearing capacity, you know, pillars, for example. But a procurer can include requirements on reuse in a tender. But if the tender says that you can only use CE marked products, then it could be potentially a problem for reuse. But this is up to the client or the tenderer then. They also made the point, my colleagues, that reused materials does not typically travel very far. So reused products which are not tested are then not CE marked, but CE marking is only relevant, of course, when they cross a border in a sense. So CE marking or not is a barrier to trade, but it's not a barrier to use. It would be the building code that could potentially then be a barrier to reuse.
Yes.
Yeah, those were the points I wanted to pass on.
Thank you, Josefina. You already covered another theme right now as well, the regulation on the CE marking. Thank you, but
apologies.
Maybe to go no problem. But maybe to go a little bit back on the reuse. Yes, I agree that indeed the client should not ask for the CE marking, and of course there should be a more open-minded. Of course, there's also always a risk that he wants to avoid as well, but the CE marking is indeed restrictive somehow. But I also think concerning the CPR, because you said maybe it doesn't include, or the manufacturers are not responsible today for the reuse of the products and the materials, and maybe the CPR should take that more into account as well. I don't know, it's just a statement or a thing we can reflect on or think about. But that's also something that maybe should be on the agendas of the CPR. And then also, testing the materials indeed can help to get a kind of certification or a warranty about the materials, the reusability of it. But then again, if I think about Valia and the SMEs, for them it's more difficult because it costs, of course, some money to get things tested. So there is a barrier as well. So good that there are standards that are being made up, as you mentioned, because maybe that will lower the barrier. I hope so, that it will. So that were some reflections of me. Valia, would you want to add something?
Yes, just to complement a bit on what you have been saying, I think Josefina gave a good overview of some things on the CPR. It's true, and indeed, in our view, there is a good balance, because it's true that if you use something in the same project, you don't need to do anything basically, and visually already it's happening, as you say, mostly for decorative products, for flooring, a lot for roofs. It is something that is happening, and it should keep happening. I agree, but it's true that if some structural products they will get standards that will provide alternative methods that are not destructive for tests, this will grow confidence in the market that many people will trust it more. So I just do so. It's a very complex issue, I think, and in my view, the new CPR in many different levels provides some things, but I know also that the countries, the national building codes have to do their homework also, because the construction products regulation is the first step, and then the countries have to do the member states have to do their homework. And you already touched on my main point that I wanted to mention, that because in your initial question, not your question, the participants' question, you mentioned certifications. We should be very careful, as you said already, that if a reused reusable product is expensive, becomes very expensive, people will not want it. So we should be very careful of, it's not regulation, but requesting a lot of steps will make the end product more expensive. People will not buy it anymore. It will not be financially good. So we need to find a good balance on ensuring safety, but at the same time, not asking administrative procedures or certifications or anything. Like, we need to find a good balance. That's my main point.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. I will go on to the next theme. We also got a question from someone who was already very attentive to which presentations would be held. So we got a question on the sufficiency theme. The question was the following, so this will be addressed to Scholt. How do we make sure we make the best use of our existing building stock? What instruments could we implement to enhance housing sufficiency in Europe? So which instruments? I was thinking about a kind of matchmaking, but maybe there is something else.
This is the big question, isn't it? That I think would require a lot of well, a lot of time to answer, but a lot of time not just to answer within the confinements of this discussion, but I think also just of further thinking. I think there are at least two aspects to this question. And so when we talk about sufficiency in the built environment, I think there is, first and foremost, there's almost like a systemic implication to this, and it's easy to link to avoidance of new construction or reducing the size of dwellings or office spaces or floor area in general. So it links to potentially contentious topics such as degrowth, and it's also clearly something that has been highlighting what is not going well in terms of allocation of resources with the current economic paradigm. So there is this sort of systemic implication that would require tweaking, and it's really hard to say what exactly policy intervention or theory of change will actually push the existing status quo towards more sufficiency. But there are, like you said, there is also this other angle when you think about the smaller scale policy interventions, or even very often, like you saw, these are like almost like informal initiatives that proves actually that this works. And this is where I think we are just at the beginning, and I just want to be humble and to be honest about the fact that there is a lot of work and analysis that still needs to be done. We are not yet in the place to say that, okay, yes, these are the single, I don't know, 5, 10 policy measure or recommendation that we can set out as a concrete action plan for EU or national level rollout or policy intervention. So if colleagues of Josephina's are asking for this for the forthcoming European affordable housing plan, we can't provide that, but I think we can provide at least an initial scoping of what's the potential out there. And this is where I think a few no-nonsense initiatives work quite well. So for instance, setting up something which is like a vacancy register, just to understand where the vacancies are taking place, because this is, I think, a key issue. It's as we know in the real estate markets and the housing markets, it's all about location, right? So it's not enough. There are limits to circularity, or there are limits to reuse. If a building is vacant and it's not in the right place, then obviously this is just something that needs to be recognized. And that also, I think, links immediately to the fact that you can't just focus on simple measures, like you said, matchmaking in individuality. They are actually very much linked to understanding what drives housing markets and housing market development, and try to work with those drivers and with those levers. And that's very often is linked to community building, security, safety, economic opportunities very much. So this is why I'm just coming back to my initial reflection that this is also very much a systemic view and requires a systemic thinking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. During your presentation on sufficiency, there were also some remarks and questions coming in. So there was a remark by, I hope I pronounce it well, Rossio Cotta. He said, we should talk about our needs first instead of questioning building use rates. So should we, if we need buildings, we should first use, of course, vacant buildings and do matchmaking or a vacancy register. But on the other hand, how can we also work on this needs of the community, of the people? Is that something someone is working on or thinking of?
I think I'm not sure if I understood the question very well, but I think that's really, it's very much the essence of what we try to highlight with sufficiency, is that this is needs-based.
Mm-hmm.
And this is now describing or defining what people's needs are. This is what I think we are very quickly in a very dangerous territory, because there's a lot of subjectivity around that. How much is the floor space per capita, or let's say in terms of energy sufficiency, what is a comfortable indoor environmental environment? And this is also, if you look at things from this perspective, very prescriptive way, I think this is when we get into very quickly in risky territories. And that's not what we tried to, the way how we try to articulate the introduction of sufficiency. And that, I think, also links to another question that has been raised, whether we have encountered resistance to the idea of sufficiency. And I think one important aspect to this is the narrative, the discourse that we used. We never thought about like imposing limits or prescriptive amount of individual ownership. It's more about right sizing rather than downsizing. It's more about providing enough for more people in terms of having enough fairness and equity, rather than taking away individual property. And that's actually the point of, when you look at, for those people who are actually willing to downsize, and I think there was a line in my presentation referring to a public survey in Germany, that actually 30% of the population think that they are living in oversized apartments or flats. And so let's assume there are people who want to live smaller. And so for those who want to do that, they are currently facing a lot of barriers. And so I think I would start working with them at first, just to enable them to do that and not face barriers. It's about enabling that and not setting out blanket prescriptions.
All right, thank you. So indeed, there is a presumption, or there is maybe a resistance that there is less individual ownership, but there's also the other way around, that people want to live smaller, but it's also difficult. All right.
Exactly, and I think it's not for everyone. That's very clear. I mean, nobody's saying that, and this is where the subjectivity comes from. But at least those who want to downsize should be enabled to do so.
Yeah. Okay. I'm learning a lot of new insights. Thank you. As Veerle said in the chat, if some of the listeners or the audience want to add something or ask something, please do. We are open for everybody to add something. So we just had the theme on sufficiency. So if you still have questions for Scholt or for somebody else, you can still. Scholt himself wants still to add something.
Yeah, because I'm just perusing the chat. I think there was another question related to how we can convince public authorities about the importance of sufficiency, and then maybe they can come in as well with reuse and nature-based solutions. There was one specific case study that we looked at when identifying and mapping the benefits related to sufficiency. And we didn't just do this for the individual owners or occupiers or we also looked at the community itself, and specifically for the public administrations. And very often, I just give you an example, developing in a brownfield or in an inner urban area, such as, infilling between two existing buildings, but there is still a vacant space, where there is existing infrastructure compared to, let's say, greenfield development, where there is nothing, is just simply economically more feasible, viable, or it just makes sense. So sufficiency also comes with this sort of wider infrastructure costs and benefits, actually, for public authorities, that you don't need to come with the sort of high-level discussion about saving planets. You can also just simply talk about saving costs and saving resources on new infrastructure investments.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I could just add to that. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question by Chris Rikers on the psychological strategies. I think what we found, because we've been working with our business network, 230, 240 companies for the last 5, 6, 7 years, trying to get them to do stuff. You need to meet people where they are. What is important for a particular company, for a particular individual? Is it waste? Is it carbon? Is it costs? Is it legacy? You need to do your research, and then you need to, structure your arguments in a way that addresses the needs and ambitions of whoever you're trying to persuade. So yeah, we need to be flexible with our storytelling, because people are motivated by different things. If we want to persuade people to make the change, yeah. Thanks for that question, Chris. Good question.
I think Chris is still in the room. He's still active in the chat, I think. So very famous circular Belgian Flemish architects. So yeah, very critical. Haha. All right, thank you, Nick. That's indeed the truth. And some of us try to do that every day, but it's still a very difficult exercise, I think, to make circularity, because it's a big theme, make it understandable for everybody and to make it actionable. I would say it's already 4:10. Maybe a quick answer to the question of, I'm sorry, I don't know if I pronounce all those names well, but Katarzyna, have you looked into the link between sufficiency and the popularity of Airbnb rentals? A spreading of such services benefiting or opposing sufficiency? I think very interesting question.
Probably also a very specific question, and
yes,
to be
very complex.
Fully honest, no, we haven't looked into this pairing of sufficiency. I would probably keep my opinion about Airbnb, and generally, I think what is being perceived in terms of like whether there is resistance or to what extent communities are embracing this type of setups or generally tourism. I think that's, I just want to reflect on the fact that this is also something that has been politicized, and it's funnily, it's being mentioned in the forthcoming work that both the European Parliament as well as the European Commission is set out to do in terms of securing and providing affordable housing. So I just want to say that probably something that needs to be looked further and evaluated further. But I would keep things there just for the time being.
Okay. Thank you. I will close the theme of sufficiency here, but it was a very interesting discussion. I will go on to the theme of circular use of water in the construction sector. So I also see it as the merging of nature and the building sector, which is not that always easy today. So the question we got during the subscriptions was, how can building design integrate circular water principles to create more sustainable water resource management? I will pass this question to Nick. Maybe you have some very bright answer to it.
Well, this wasn't really covered in the building prosperity study, but I think someone might have picked up that in a previous life I was a water engineer, and indeed for about 6 or 7 years ago I looked in detail at the link between circular economy and water resource management. So in regard to buildings, I mean, there's just that like basic idea that buildings can be more of I think people are familiar with the hydrological cycle, they can be more active participants in the water cycle rather than just passive consumers of water. And so, so you could consider a number of different design strategies in that regard. So closed loop water systems within buildings can dramatically reduce demand and also importantly discharge. So I seem to recall coming across in my research buildings in New York that recycle grey water for toilet flushing, cooling systems, irrigation, and they're reducing water demand to a comparable building. I believe it was like a 100 apartment like building block, reduce its water demand by 50% and its discharge by 60%. So closed loop water systems, and then related to that, like the separation of water streams by different quality requirements. Not all water uses need to be potable grade water. Irrigation, cooling, toilet flushing can utilize grey water, treated grey water or harvested rainwater. And this sort of quality matching approach then preserves high quality, resource intense, because it costs a lot of money to treat water to potable grade for essential uses. I was lucky enough to go to Japan in 2019, just before COVID, and I visited the bathroom of a restaurant, and the where you clean your hands, the sink was actually integrated into the cistern of the toilet. So you clean your hands, it goes directly into the cistern and then directly into the toilet flush. We could lean into data, smart water systems with sensors that monitor usage patterns. So this is all about, IoT, Internet of Things applied to water resource management. And then also rooftops, vertical surfaces offer opportunities for water harvesting, water efficient urban agriculture. And this is not just good for water management, but it can also be great for insulating or cooling buildings or reducing stormwater runoff. So, multiple benefits. So, so I think, plenty of ways that you can integrate circular economy principles into water resource management, shifting buildings from water consumers to be sort of regenerative nodes in a circular urban water system.
Yeah. All right. A lot of solutions already available. I think if we look into it, maybe there are already some publications and reports on it. I don't know, but that would be interesting as well. So thank you for your clear answer, Nick. I will go on further because there's no follow-up question. There were still also some questions on the theme of education and training. We already talked about it a little, but maybe we can go a bit further on it. Also, Arnaud already mentioned something about it in his presentation, but it still remains a question among many of us. So on circular construction, university educate their students at a high level on this topic, but still, how can the people on the construction sites be trained in circular economy? So I saw that Arnaud and ETH Zurich already have a course of 1 week with theory and practice and site visits. But are there other opportunities or strategies to educate our construction people? Yeah,
should I start?
Sure.
I want to say something clear is we are addressed to more engineers and architects. So I don't think we are the right person to teach a mason to work with earth. I mean, I was working as a earth builder, so I could, but that's not the aim of our teaching. Our teaching makes hands-on because we think it's important for designers and the decisional people to be aware on the material and to understand it. But we are not focusing on the skilled like a hand worker. But beside, I know that it's. There's a lot of workshops and different teaching. I know, for example, for earth construction in Germany, they started a teaching addressed to the people who wants to make a company that will work with earth, and I think that's could be extended to other topic larger. Now they started this also in Switzerland. I'm not the best person. I don't have an overview, but just to be sure, we are more addressed on the decisional point of view.
Yeah, all right. There was also I will give the word to Valia in a minute. In the chat today, there was also the question if there are reports or studies addressing this. If anybody knows studies or reports, please share them about employment potential and upscaling needs for workers in construction. So there is a lot of need for it. So if somebody knows it, please share it with us. But Valia, maybe you want to add something on this topic.
Yes, it is a very important topic, in fact, and it concerns us a lot, of course, because for a small company, it's quite hard to find the time and the money to retrain their staff if they don't see a business reason, if there is no, if they don't see the immediate result very quickly, because a big company, if you miss one person for 1 week, it's okay. A small company, it's not okay. The business has to continue going somehow. So it is something that on our level, of course, because we are an association, we try to engage a lot. For the moment, there are many initiatives here and there that try to provide some proposals, some solutions. We are involved in Horizon projects that are dealing with this. In our capacity, of course, we try to disseminate what is learned in these Horizon projects. We organize trainings for the members of our members, so local companies, or we try to put our little stone in this path. But of course, it's much more complicated. There are things happening in the European level. There is the construction blueprint for skills that builds on the pact for skills, trying to find solutions of this. I don't have an answer, of course, but vocational training, adapting vocational training and lifelong learning is a big part of this. Adapting it to respond to future needs is a big part of it. And another part of it is also to attract new talent, because it's not only in regards to circularity, to sustainability skills. Generally, construction is facing problems in attracting talent. And we think that actually it's positive because it promotes an image for the sector if we manage to, we need some jobs related to circularity and sustainability. And the young generation is interested in this topic. So we can use it in our advantage, train them, and then help them enter the workforce this way. This is our position. As I said, I don't have really a reply. just also since we speak about education, in the previous question or the previous before, it's something that, because training is, yes, on companies, broadening it, of course, the public needs to be trained and educated the topic, but also public authorities. It's very important that they get educated on how can they make public procurement with this in mind. So it's a whole system change, this systemic change that we need there.
That's true. The awareness and the knowledge should be, more spread out. Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. That's true. If I remember well, somebody already posted a report on green skills, but I cannot find it back immediately. I will look afterwards, but there was posted something in any way.
It was a report of the economics. I don't know it, but they didn't send the link. They just said we could Google it. I want to come back on something what Evangelia just said. I think that's totally right. There's a big fight to implement more education in the universities, in the high schools, that people are more aware of these circularity or regenerative aspect. But there is also a big need of having the people more on sites and having more skilled person working, not only academics and things. So I don't have an explanation or a solution, but I just say that both fights are important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that also I forgot to say before, is that for publications, I will have to check with our projects if there is some public documents that we can share with you that are relevant. For instance, there is an observatory to anticipate skills for the green transition. So if there is a public document, I would share with you.
Indeed, as Veerle is saying, I still have 3 minutes, so we will have to close our panel discussion. I would say if there is one more very important question somewhere hanging, please ask it now. Otherwise, you will finish this panel discussion. I see that Stijn Douwe is also making or showing off his container, and it's indeed very much, or it's very important, and it's very interesting to have a look at it. I saw it already in real life, so I was impressed. And for the construction sector, it can give a lot of practical insights. So thank you for sharing, Stijn. Arnaud, maybe a last remark?
Very, very short one about the reuse. There was a question on how can we certificate reuse product. And somehow, for me, I just want to point it out that it's maybe not the most important issue nowadays. I think to be really scaling up the reuse, we have to match the matchmaking you were talking about, to match the where is what available and when is it available, to avoid this storage problem. And I just want to talk about an initiative here in Switzerland. The city, I think it's in Zurich, and it may be also in Basel. I hope I'm not wrong. Where they ask for every public building, when they make a competition, they give already an inventory of all the, if the building may be destroyed, that the information is there for the architect or the designer or the partners who will propose the project. And if that's a very simple somehow initiative on the policy on the public level, that if this happens, then the people have the information to eventually use these material. And I think that would make more effect than to certificate them somehow. Both are important, but the priority would be maybe this.
Okay, thank you. We'll unfortunately have to close up, so I will give back the word to Veerle, but thank you for all your enthusiasm and your great answers. I hope, and I think it was very interesting and a very good discussion. So I hope we'll meet again and speak again.
Thank you also, Charlotte, for coordinating and moderating this panel discussion. It was really interesting. I think we could have talked for hours, but yeah, time's up and probably a new meeting is waiting for you. I just wanted to share the website of the stakeholder platform, in which you will find also the recordings of this circular talk, but also the link to the reading guide. We only had 5 presentations, 5 publications, but the reading guide has many, many more. So please look at it. I will also send you an email to everyone who registered next week somewhere when the recordings is ready, and then also with the link to some of these publications and also to the reading guide. I think we can ask the stakeholder platform to make one update of this reading guide. If you have a study that you really want to be included in this reading guide, please put the page where you want it, a sentence what you want to add, and the link to your publication to us. Please send it to us, and then we will try to integrate it for the version of 2025. And next year, probably we will have a new one of interesting studies from 2025. Please do this perhaps before 1st of April, so we can close this reading guide of last year by 2 weeks or something. So thank you so much. Please continue the discussion in the LinkedIn groups, and I hope to see all of you next Circular Talk. Oh, perhaps one other thing, on the 9th of April, the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform has its stakeholder event. And then in the Green Week, the Green Week of the European Commission will also be completely focusing on circular economy. And there will also be a stakeholder event from the ECESP. So please continue watching our news, and we'll hope to see you there. Goodbye.